Oh,
And welcome to another Wake Up and Deliver with Matt and John.
look at this. Look at these efforts with the lighting effects and everything. Do you see the effort that goes into starting each week the right way for everybody?
The amount of effort. We can start a song too with every. Well, wake up and deliver with John and Matt.
We should
go.
actually.
Good morning.
Jingles, especially this.
Well, December we'll do a jingle every week until Christmas.
There you go. Oh, wait, that sounds like a commitment. We'll consider jingling through December. We'll figure it out. See what we got to do. Like we're not the most like tech savvy like that way.
We'll rotate. This week we got my camera back. We had some technical difficulties, and we fixed things up, so we're good to go. We're gonna have some fun as always. We're starting off with some brain food to get the brain warmed up. But as always, thank you everybody for joining us. Good shout out to everybody. Good morning. Good morning. Wake Up and Deliver Season 2, Episode 43. Here we go.
Here we go.
What do we got? Which button do I hit here? There we go. Reliability is magnetic because humans are hardwired to avoid risk. So once you prove yourself trustworthy and reliable, you become the default choice for opportunities without ever asking for them.
Oh yeah, we could frame this one. This one should be on everyone's wall. Actually, it's funny enough because, I don't think sometimes people realize how often even things like this, I think, people will gravitate towards this and understand maybe in a business to business context, like, hey, I'm trying to solicit your business, I'm trying to be a supplier. People probably easily see that link. But I would offer, though, that in any context you work, same organization, same department, different departments, anything like that, that would hold true. I think, more often than not, the people that feel that they see other people getting more opportunity, or they see, more things happening a certain way, or they wonder why, certain departments or certain teams or whatever seem to have more latitude and flexibility. I would say that almost always you could come down to something like that it's because there's, more reliability, more consistency, and then therefore more trust. And to your point, since people will default to that if they can to avoid risk, because we are very risk averse in terms of our psychology, that fits super well. I like that one. You can send that one over. I'll keep that one for sure.
Yes, we're framing it. Eventually, the back wall of John's house is going to be quotes that we've had in the morning that get his day started. Hang in there, John. This is going to be the best one. It's going to be like the cat on the clothesline. Hang in there.
There you go. We'll get there.
As always, we're going to have some cool logistics conversations, but John wants to talk about reliability, and he didn't even know that was the quote. Specifically, reliability on takeoff.
Well, see, now you've made it like really sketchy. Everyone's already in there being like, oh no, they didn't, like it's too soon. And we weren't trying to be that edgy about it. But obviously the first thing I was saying to Matt that we should be speaking about today is the tragedy that happened, with UPS sort of last week, where one of their MD-11 freighters crashed after getting about 100 feet into the air. It just kind of came slamming back down to the ground. Terrible accident, and the footage was insane, just like what the devastation. 3 people, unfortunately, that were part of the crew itself passed away, and then another 11 all on the ground. Wild when you think about, like, for packages. Like, you know what I mean? Like in the grand scheme of things, and like just moving that kind of product and that kind of activity, that something happened there. So, that in itself, like to have a major event from someone that obviously is a provider that is not new to air traffic. They have a huge hub. It's a huge part of their infrastructure, FedEx as well. And now all of a sudden, you've got them grounding these particular planes, sorry, not flights, but these particular planes out of their fleet. So UPS and FedEx are both doing that. I think it's about 9% of the UPS sort of freighter fleet and 4% of the FedEx fleet. And that was all at the recommendation of Boeing, I believe, who's like, let's kind of like see what happened there and like just ground all of these freighters. And I mean, realistically, these are older planes. So, I mean, I think that there's some knowledge there, but I mean, like, hey, they're still in service.
MD-11s, those are McDonnell Douglases, aren't they?
Yeah, so older planes, they stopped making them I think around the end of 2000. So, I mean, even that we're in 2025, like that kind of shows, FYI, everybody, just like, when you invest in infrastructure and stuff like that, like the length of time or that life cycle that, these organizations look to try to get out of their assets. Matt, I'm sure, you've been exposed to it. One of the hardest things, let's even say over the road logistics, is constant that tension that you'll often feel within an organization when it comes to buying new trucks. Everybody appreciates the value of the new trucks and everybody would want them, but the reality is that the profitability of those older vehicles and really getting the maximum out, since you don't have that capital expense, you're not paying down those payments of it anymore, becomes a really hard thing for people to sort of move away from, overcome, and kind of have that continued cycle of reinvestment in their assets.
And before we move into it, I agree with you. Like a lot of people, want 10 years younger, but as things are crunching right now, people are holding on to older equipment, which increases the frequency of breakdowns and challenges in services. But we're going to stick with the air freight because there's a lot of stuff happening in air freight right now. We don't talk a lot about it very specifically. The other part is the FAA, obviously with the furlough, is going to be slowing down the amount of air traffic controllers that are working, and they're going to be reducing by, I think it was 10% that I saw. It's going to cause a lot of air traffic, which includes the cargo, which it might not seem like a big deal, but we're coming into the fourth quarter, last mile. Majority of that is air freight when it comes to last mile, when it comes to Christmas time, because you want something moved quickly. If it's not on the boat right now, I don't know if you're going to get it at Christmas time.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes people think of like, oh, when did I have that? Like the reality is that like this stuff for Christmas or whatever, like this was bought before the summer, sort of shipped kind of like, end of August into early September. It takes sort of 50, 60 days plus sometimes on the boat just for it to start being able to trickle in through, distribution networks through November and obviously into the holiday period of December. And, to Matt's point, like that's one thing. You have two problems with like, air traffic controllers. One, the fewer people working in that capacity means that like, just managing all of the air traffic at different places becomes more challenging, right? Of course, there is a lot of like sort of like freight style activity that goes to different types of airports than, your major commercial consumer airports, if you think about it. But a lot of the services that you have seen offered, if you are a newer merchant, if you are tied to e-com, if you are tied to sort of any of this modern distribution, really actually has leveraged a lot of consumer flights and the additional cargo that can be sold on there. Like Delta, for example, runs their own program called Smart Cargo, like which is exactly that, using available cargo capacity on commercial flights. So not only are you going to have the impact of like maybe fewer planes flying, which means fewer like potential opportunities for cargo movements, but then you just have the congestion factor to deal with on a system that is extremely timed.
Well, not only that, it's disproportionately impacts smaller airports. So a lot of the cargo planes use smaller airports. So it'll be the offshoot airport. You're not going to go to JFK. You might use one of the smaller airports, but as that is disproportionately affected more and gets pushed into JFK, there's increased costs from using those airports. There's increased costs from using different airfields that you're not set up to use for that cargo, because it's obviously you don't need to have it for the commercial aspect of it. And it does affect that final dollar. So it's going to be interesting how that plays out as the weeks come through, right?
Yeah, I do. And this is something from a conversation that came up and some feedback that I shared with someone was that just because you pay for it, like doesn't necessarily mean that you can then expect or expedite anything, for example, or just think that like, hey, I'll pay the premium delivery fee. I better expect everything to go clean, because the reality is the biggest challenge with a lot of logistics and a lot of this sort of execution becomes the fact that like you're not really in control of so many of these things that can be a negative impactor to your overall performance, right? I can't change what's going to happen at that airport. I don't know then how the weather is going to impact that airport. I don't know then because of that how many days behind someone would be. I don't know if something gets diverted, if it gets diverted to a place where I don't actually have then the over the road coverage. There's so many things that go on. So, probably the biggest piece of advice I could put out there for anybody that is looking to really manage their peak season, is just to be careful about the fact of thinking that you can pay your way out of anything. Even though in the past, I know, Matt, we've talked about the fact of like, I do say that in logistics, you can do anything as long as you're willing to pay for it. You still have to balance that with the realities of the market, unless you're willing to pay wild amounts of money to essentially be number one.
And that is affecting air freight all across, and to that point, affecting just because of the United States, it's also affecting the Canadian side with CargoJet saying they're feeling the pain. They have to reduce a lot of their flights, not because of the air traffic control, also because of the trade war, which they weren't aware that it's going to affect them this deeply, this long. All these things are really impacting this final, fourth quarter push that we're going to be having. I think it's going to be quite interesting. I don't know if it's going to be a bottleneck, but maybe an equalization prior to this freight drop that we've been feeling. I'm not convinced on that. I know there's been a lot of conversation in the network saying, hey, maybe the rates are going to rebound because of all this. I still see there's a lot of capacity out there as people are shipping a lot less than they were before. But
well, and to tie into that, so another report that came out was Maersk or whatever, that was basically saying that, hey, logistics costs are continuing to increase. Like they put out a study there that basically said that, last mile delivery costs are sitting now more at like 40%. I think, people for a long time have thrown around this concept of 25 to 50%, 30 to 50% or whatever. But, they're basically saying that, as this continued expectation, consumer expectation is there, the costs are going higher and higher, which I think is an important thing, because the reality is that there's such a push and pull. Like when you're talking about it, it's like, of course you can, have capacity, and of course you could pay, but it's like, as rates are going up, a lot of shippers then are being like, well, I don't want to pay more money. I can't afford to pay more money. I've already set my offers. I've got my landed costs. I've got everything like already aligned for my budget. So then they keep going towards, other alternative delivery networks that are offering low cost service. But like realistically, like the costs become, there's a floor to a certain degree for everybody. You know what I mean? About what it's going to take to actually deliver something, and to deliver something like effectively. And then I think, you can very quickly fall down the rabbit hole where like, sure, you might be able to get it delivered for $2. And then if someone, sees you on the camera, and some guy's basically just, slams his brakes to drop the package off at the back of your driveway as he's, sort of peeling out of the neighborhood. I think that there's a real mindfulness that has to happen around like, what's the quality of that experience that then you're giving the customers.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point. Like the quality aspect of how you perform in the fourth quarter determines the loyalty you'll have from those customers come the first, second, and third quarter. If they had a great experience with you during Christmas time and during the crunch time of getting their package the way they were supposed to, for when they were supposed to, is really going to determine how much they're going to be loyal to you come the beginning of the season.
For sure. But I think that extends just beyond that, right? So, I mean, I think like the biggest thing that anyone can do, that if you're part of this value chain, whether you're on the manufacturing side, whether you're, sort of doing transportation, whether you're doing warehousing, whether you're doing delivery, the biggest thing that you can do for your customers is to just, actually be more focused on providing sort of certainty and clarity, even if it's an answer they may not love. Like, I would much rather have someone like, let's say I'm co-manufacturing a product. I would much rather than be like, listen, I know I told you, what do we today? Like November 10th. I know that like we could be like, hey, I know I said November 10th, but it's really going to be another 2 weeks. Now, in all fairness, you don't want to get that at the last minute. But the thing is that constantly just not getting the right information, or not having the right certainty around stuff. I think that's really what's hurting people, is that be more clear about what you can do, and then, give dates and make promises that you can actually hit. Don't try to make promises that like you can only hit if like, 27 other things go right. You know what I mean? Like,
and that translates so well into a lot of different things, John. I'm glad you kind of brought that up. It's same as in logistics, last mile, and everything. If you don't communicate the challenges that you're having midstream, or at the beginning stream, or at the end stream, the person along that route can't help you get through it. If all of a sudden it's like, hey, it's 5:00, where's my delivery? Oh shit, I ran into some traffic. I did this, the warehouse did that, but you didn't communicate any of that all the way through. So all of a sudden it's like well, what the hell are you doing? Why aren't you being reliable with your delivery? Right. And so that makes that communication is vital all the way through your whole supply chain as it's happening, because you can communicate it downstream and really develop it with your customers so they understand what is going on. And so that pain isn't as painful to them, and they understand, hey, we were warned this was going to happen.
Yeah, and dude, it's funny because like I think that like as operations people in general, we always get the rough end of the stick, right? You get the marketing people, you get the sales people that are always like wanting to like double down on these like insane odds, you know what I mean? Of like, oh well, no, there's like a possibility that all of these things can happen, so we just need to make it happen. And very often I think in situations you get the operations people who seem like they're way more hesitant, or they hedge too much, or they buffer too much. But I think that that's because of the fact that like we deal in a world where for the most part, you're always managing the exceptions. You're always managing the problems. Like, you know what I mean? And that you're the one essentially responsible if things don't like all deliver. So it's like, even in the past, I never expected any of my teams. It's like, I don't want to give an answer that you just think someone wants to hear, unless we're really going to be able to deliver on it. I'd rather you say like, hey, if you force that, like, I think there's a 10% chance that happens. And I think that it's 90% that it's going to be more like this. Plan the business as you will, but like, I find that operations people, there's like an art to having to, balance everyone's expectations.
I think people are afraid to be challenged. People are afraid of challenging and being challenged, because that automatically thinks of a terms of right and wrong. And being challenged doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It means there's a different perspective to the outcome, and that we didn't consider or might consider. So that's why, I always talk to my carriers, I always talk to my vendors and my customers, and I probe them with questions, but I expect them to probe me with questions as well. People poke holes at my plan. I'm like, hey, this is what I'm going to do. Is this what you're expecting? They're like, hey, have you considered these things? I'm like, oh, no. And it kind of reminds me of a story many, many, many years ago when I used to be the target on site at the DC for a carrier. And it was the night before a snowstorm. Speaking of snowstorms, last night, and we were late, for a whole bunch of deliveries. And I got in, I told the target team, I'm sorry, we're late to snow, and they were angry. I'm like, I couldn't understand why they were angry. And I remember my mentor Norm going to me, he goes, there was a snowstorm coming. I'm like, yeah. You could have done different things to help reduce that pain to the customer. Yes, there's a snowstorm coming. Could you have got the trucks there a little bit earlier? Could you have communicated something a little bit differently versus going, well, this is the expected thing. Everybody knows this is happening. No, you should have to do one step further on that. Just because it's expected and everybody knows about it, then you might not know the implications and the what am I trying to say? The lost for words here, John. Give me some of those words that I need.
I don't know what the unforeseen consequences.
Yeah, the unforeseen consequences to help alleviate that kind of conversation to make it better. And that's part of the challenge that I think a lot of people have, is they don't like those unhappy conversations with their customers, their vendors, or anybody within their organization. They just rather be, yeah, sure, let's please it. I'm going to watch it burn from the sidelines, which is, that quiet quitting that we've had for the last couple of years, I think applies to this quiet kind of let things happen and see how my boss thinks it's going to work. I think the people that raise their hands are going to be far more successful coming the next little bit, as people are being challenged by AI and what they're doing. And so you have to have some kind of reliability that makes you better than what can be automated.
You know what the funniest thing I think AI is going to have a hard time with in logistics? The fact that like very often a decision that was made the previous time is not actually is not considered
the same.
The good decision the next time. I think the bots are going to just blow up trying to. It's like, but last time this was the solution, and these are the exact same conditions. Yeah, but it feels different. I do agree with you though. I think a lot of people, what they end up happening a little bit because of that is that they know that, hey, that storm is coming. Hey, they know maybe last time they tried really hard, maybe 2 times before they tried really hard. I think sometimes it's very difficult for people to continue to hit the reset, especially if they feel that they can push stuff to things that are outside of their control. But that said, it's like I always found success in trying to get people to think about the fact of like, whether you can rationalize it or not, it's like, this outcome is coming. So the one about your customer is a good point. Like, it's like, okay, listen, yeah, it's going to be a brutal snowstorm maybe, or like maybe we lost power, maybe the whole city lost power, like maybe their cooler blew up, like doesn't matter. You still kind of can say like, what do you think they're going to react like? What do you think their expectations are going to be? And how do you know what I mean? And, I think that's where it gets challenging sometimes for people to be like, yeah, but like, sometimes it's yes, sometimes it's no. And it's like, yeah, sometimes it is. That's kind of a little bit life and logistics too, is that like sometimes similar conditions, people will accept your solution or they'll want your solution. And then other times they won't. And I think that becomes very difficult for some people.
I think even one step further is that how you handle those situations, even on simple things as like risk mitigation, and how you communicate and how quickly you run through it and explain that back to your customer can really make you the X amount difference that they're looking for. Another experience I'll talk about is recently, there was an incident where there was a claim against one of our loads. And we recovered very quickly. Like shit happens. Accidents do happen. Nobody was hurt. Everybody was fine. But cargo was damaged, right? And we expeditiously worked with the carrier. The carrier was a very good carrier that we obviously were relying on, a great partner of ours. And their insurance was a great partner of theirs. And we resolved everything in like 15 days. And the customer is extremely happy. And they said, we've never had someone of our partners to resolve a claim that quickly. That means so much more to us than $1 that is cheaper, right? And
so many people try to fight those claims till the end of time.
But that's the whole piece, right? Like it was a clear-cut case. If it wasn't a clear-cut case, you kind of can go back and forth and kind of do different things. But I've been in situations where they've lasted 2-3 years sometimes, and the customer's furious with you. Like, listen, guys, like the trailer tipped, like it was guy hit dry ice. Like there's nothing more we can do here. Yeah. And then you drag it on for whatever reason. How you risk mitigate a lot of those challenges as well with your customer and how you communicate those do set you up for that topic that we talked about at the beginning, that reliable person. They can trust you that you're doing the right thing for them, and they'll just throw freight for you or business at you because they know that you'll take care of them to the degree of level that they expect everybody should be running at, not the bare minimum.
Yeah. I don't disagree. And I think that these are all like really things that people need to be thinking about. Like, it's funny. So this time of year, I always kind of laugh because like, I find that like the news feeds and everything get like just popped off, especially these days with like, oh, like, look at this one. Like I found one earlier. It's like called Preparing for Peak Season. You know what I mean? And it's coming out with like this checklist. People love their listicles and stuff. It starts talking about some of the biggest challenges where it's like, you talk about your forecasting, you're talking about your warehouse capacity, talking about your seasonal labor cost pressures, last mile delivery, real-time visibility, and then, the balance of all of these things. But like a full article and there's like nothing actually interesting. And I know I say that, but it's like more in the sense of like every one of those things is a thing. And I also think for some people, like this is like way out of context. Like, for example, if you're into November now, okay, and you are now just starting to think about, like what are my forecasts going to be, and what am I going to sell like, and how is that going to push through different channels, and what partners, like at a warehousing level, transportation level, delivery level, how are all these people going to be impacted? If you're just thinking about this now, you are not prepared for peak season. Like, you know what I mean? So it's like, these are not things. The only thing that realistically you should be focused on now is understanding sort of like what you were expecting, sort of like either week over week, or as you move through, let's call it end of October and into December, understand whether or not that's happening and sort of have your contingency plan or your action plan that you should already have prepared. Like, and trailing, like, hey, am I underselling? If I'm underselling, what am I going to do? And what are those actions going to have on my partners? When do I need to talk to them? When do I need to make some of these decisions? And if you're overselling, which most people think is sometimes not a bad idea, but can provide enough of a challenge too, because the thing is that you don't necessarily want to sell out too quickly, or you don't want to maybe lock up inventory in one channel versus another. It's very common for, especially e-com brands. It's like, oh, do you have it in your 3PL? Do you have it at Amazon? Because once it's at Amazon, it's not the easiest thing to get out and pull back, like, and you're most certainly not going to hit peak season. And same thing too, if you're not watching sort of your inventory in these different sites and these different channels that you're selling on, you can't react just at the last second. So I always find these articles kind of funny just because of the fact that like these things are in play now. Now it should be more about monitoring to your plan and, you know, kind of executing your tweaks. Not there's nothing here that you should just be figuring out now.
What's the scary part is that article that you're reading is being scraped by an AI and it's taking it.
Yeah.
And it's taking that as the literal truth and it's going to be in a plan. And that's going to be the plan for something.
So here's actually even an interesting one that like you'll probably like. So one of these tips when it's talking about like it has it under last mile, but I would probably broaden that out. And it says pre-book your carrier capacity early. Now,
of course, that's a give. You pre-book it. Just lock it in.
But this is what I think is actually really funny because like the thing is that all of these things, some of these things can happen, and then like schedule flexible and off-peak deliveries. Okay, how? Like and same thing with like your pre-booking. It's
just,
like if I'm
John, schedule them. Like what do you mean how?
But that's what I'm saying. Like if I'm a carrier and I want to and you come to me as a customer and you're like, hey, I want to pre-book it. Okay, then I guess you're going to prepay for X amount of packages because that's pretty much the only way I'm going to do that. If you want to make that commitment and stuff. And then, you know, the reality is most businesses don't have the cash flow to start pre-booking and prepaying before they even have a sale. So it's like some of these things, and to your point, like this is the stuff then that have people being like, oh, I don't need support. I'm going to use the bots. I don't think there's anything wrong with this concept. It's wildly misapplied in the way that it thinks you can apply it. What I would say, though, is that an important twist to something like that would be, you know, connecting with your key carriers, understanding what they feel that capacity level is that they'll guarantee you or that they feel that they can support without any real change, which for most carriers is more or less your baseline activity with maybe some small addition, you know, 10, 15% more maybe.
But see, there's a problem there, John. Oh. You know, the problem is a lot of the smaller CPGs might use an aggregate and they don't know who they're... Exactly. And they don't know who their carriers are, and they don't know the process. They don't know the details. They just have this aggregate that they're using, and then all of a sudden it's like, can you match this? And the aggregate has no idea. The aggregate is going to go be like, well, yes. And then when the challenges happen, unforeseen, unreliable challenges that will happen, they can't keep up. The aggregate doesn't have the means to help you get out of that unless you drive up the price, and you're not going to pre-purchase with the aggregate because they're not going to have the means to support that pre-purchase.
They couldn't guarantee it anyway. Like
exactly.
Unless they pushed it through. You're right. So it's like you have to be working with the carrier directly. And even then, I could tell you that there would be a number of carriers that I don't think it would ever be a good idea to prepay them. Like, you know what I mean? Like, because I don't think that they have enough like real control over their network to be able to guarantee you any real level of service.
Yeah, and you can guarantee if you're big enough of a shipper and if big enough of a weight. But majority of people are just like you and I, John. They're small little mom and pop type guys, and they don't have the means to secure that kind of capacity. So it really becomes more of a stranglehold for those smaller retailers, smaller shops that have to really figure out. And when it comes to crunch time, that could be the difference between having turkey or having some just, you know, pilaf rice for Christmas, right? And it makes a big difference. And that's why when we talk about securing capacity with your carrier, it really means if you're smaller CPG, really getting to know who they are, what they do, and why they should continue partnering with you coming to fourth quarter. If you've been loyal to them all year long, you should expect that loyalty in the fourth quarter. If you don't see that loyalty coming in the fourth quarter, first quarter, you should really revisit who you should be using because they weren't there when you needed them, even though they promised that they'd be there for you.
Yeah, and I think that's a good mistake. You know, like there's so much talk about like diversification using platforms and, you know, just, like it's the Valhalla because it uses up available capacity and whatever. But to your point, if you don't have a direct relationship, it's fine. And I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. You made a good point, and when we were chatting with Dan and stuff like that, about how kind of like the right tool for the right situation. And I do think that, you know, the baseline of most people's activity, if you want to have strong operations, if you want to have strong execution, you really want to be able to meet your promises like almost all the time, you have to have those commitments two ways, right? Like if you want someone doing it really well for you, you have to be able to be there for them, to your point, year round, because at Q4, it's kind of like a retail store. It's like they're going to get sales just because they put stuff out on a table, so to speak. So the carriers are no different. Like there's volume everywhere. Like, you know, they know it's opportunistic, so they're just going to kind of take it. But the real quality, you know, and getting those real items that you want, i.e. from the right retailer, or getting the real price points that you want, or getting the right service, comes from the fact of like, they're like, no, this is XYZ. We're going to make sure this is done right, so to speak, or whatever. And I think that, to your point, that's what enough people aren't doing these days. They're not building those. Everyone says relationships, but I mean, just think about it as partnerships more than anything else. It's like, if you're a good partner and your two businesses are good partners, like then there's nothing but value and reason for everyone to continue it. If one is just opportunistic off the other, or one is trying to kill the other and you know, make it all about them, like you can't realistically expect yourself to get a lot of high quality performance.
One side can't be always winning. That's what I always tell my partners. I'm like, and they're like, oh, are you paying this out of your pocket? I'm like, yeah, this time I am, because the last few times you did, and it's only fair that it's an equal weighted system. And I can't always win, guys, because if I always win, when I need you, you won't be there.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And that's the biggest thing I always message, but it is that time.
It is that time. We just rolled right through again, another full show. I don't even know, like we barely have time to breathe some weeks. It's just, there's so much.
Final thoughts for November.
No, I had lots of my final thoughts about that. Like, you give your final thoughts about what you're seeing with some of this. Like, talk about capacity stuff, and you talked about having some capacity. I talked about some issues with capacity. What are you really seeing? You know, kind of more end to end.
I see a lot of uneasiness in the system still, and a lot of people being driven by fear, not by logic, and that's because of the system is you know, not a lot of people have that set surety of what the fourth quarter is going to be. Usually people survive year long and hoping that they make up the profit by the fourth quarter. We're not sure this year. So that's the hard part. Go, John. Run with it. Run with it.
Like to your point about like companies that just don't know if they're going to be able to continue. Like the Funko product, they're talking about how they don't think they're operating, like they're like, this isn't working. Like, we're bleeding cash. And I mean, they're everywhere. Just as an FYI for all of you D2C brands that want to just get into retail and think that that's the be all and end all. You know, these little toys are everywhere, and they're like, yeah, we're looking like we're gonna just essentially implode here.
Yeah, and that happens, right? So reliability. Start with the same message that we started with. I'm ending with it. Just focus on that reliability. And on that note, I bid you adieu. I'm going to change it up this time.
Oh, wow. Look at this getting too fancy. You're like, geez.